All right, we are happy that you are here for this webinar. We are right at 12 noon Central, so we are going to go ahead and get started. And we had a wonderful response to this webinar, and so we are thrilled that this has gotten so much attention. So we're just going to have some people joining as we get started. My name is Amanda Tyler. I'm Executive Director of Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty and lead organizer of Christians Against Christian Nationalism. And so I just wanted to say a few words about our organizations before I pass it off to Bea Moorhead of Texas Impact, who will also introduce Texas Impact for us all. So Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty is an 88-year-old education and advocacy organization headquartered on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and our mission is faith freedom for all. So we bring a religious perspective, and specifically a Baptist perspective, to the issues of religious freedom and how they are best protected in the United States context through the separation of church and state. And I am executive director and live and work in Dallas, Texas. And so am also engaged here as a fellow Texas resident, and am eager to share with you all some tips on how best to engage in this particular concern that we have, which is a new curriculum proposed by the Texas Education Agency for the State Board of Education to consider later this year. And so just a quick roadmap of where we'll go. After Bea does her introduction of Texas Impact, I will give a very top line explanation of why this particular curriculum is concerning from a religious freedom perspective and a separation of church and state perspective. And then Reagan Williams will be walking through how you can actually access this curriculum yourself, as well as how to submit some public comments. And then we will take your questions and answers that you can submit through the Q&A box on your screen before we wrap up the webinar today. So with that, I am going to invite Bea Moorhead to come off camera, or Scott Atnip from Texas Impact to come off camera and talk about the work of Texas Impact.
Hey friends, Bea says hello. She is with us and might rejoin here momentarily. But my name is Scott Atnip, and I'm the Director of Public Witness for Texas Impact. And we are also excited to be a part of this project. Texas Impact represents mainline faith communities throughout the state of Texas on a consensus legislative agenda. And one of the biggest issues that they work on, or that the board has chosen for us to work on over time, has been both religious freedom and public education. We have a public school defenders team that is working to organize in local school districts to work on issues like we're going to be talking about today. And so we are excited to be a part of this conversation and happy to answer questions throughout or in follow-up if anybody has any. But thank you all for being here today. It's a great turnout and we're excited to be a part of it.
Thanks so much, Scott, and thanks for the partnership with Texas Impact, along with so many other groups who are concerned about this curriculum. So I'm going to ask Reagan to have some slides to share as I present that will hopefully make this information a little bit more accessible. We will be sharing these slides after the presentation, and so feel free to take notes, but know that you will also get access to these slides after the webinar.
All right, I'll share screen right now. Let me go different one real quick.
So just from a legal perspective, while we get our slides up and running, I want to explain why this particular curriculum poses some problems for religious freedom and separation of church and state. So religious freedom is protected in this country, of course, by the First Amendment and among other legal protections. And the First Amendment has two religion clauses, a free exercise clause and a no establishment clause. And many years ago, back in the 1960s, the U.S. Supreme Court held unconstitutional mandatory Bible readings in the public schools, along with mandatory or school-sponsored prayer in the public schools. And they did so under a First Amendment analysis that applied the no establishment clause of the First Amendment, saying that to put forward for the public schools to impose Bible reading on students would violate their religious freedom rights because the government was taking a position on religion. But since the 1960s, there has been broad agreement from various groups about how best to protect religious freedom in the public schools, to protect everyone's religious freedom. And the TEA has said that it is both legal and desirable for public schools to teach about religion, but they have to do so in appropriate, even-handed ways that do not promote or disparage religion or non-religion in general, or show favoritism toward particular traditions. And this particular quote from the 1960s case, Abington School District versus Schempp, says it this way: it might well be said that one's education is not complete without a study of comparative religion or the history of religion and its relationship to the advancement of civilization. It certainly may be said that the Bible is worthy of study for its literary and historic qualities. Nothing we have said here indicates that such study of the Bible or of religion, when presented objectively as part of a secular program of education, may not be affected consistently with the First Amendment. And so, in other words, the question is not whether a discussion of religion belongs in the public schools. It certainly does. But it is rather, how is that religion being presented? And this court case has held, again, for more than 50 years, that it should be done objectively and not devotionally. And so some questions to consider. And these questions come from a leader, a scholar in this area of the work, Dr. Mark Chansey, who has been advising the North Texas Christians Against Christian Nationalism project with regard to this curriculum. He provides several questions to ask, so for us to be able to determine whether this particular curriculum teaches about religion in a balanced and age-appropriate manner, or whether it is promoting religion in general or Christianity or any other traditions in particular. And so these are the questions that we have to ask ourselves and put against the curriculum. Does the lesson have a clear secular purpose, or does it seem to have a religious agenda? Does it cross the line from teaching about religion to promoting religious beliefs? Is the material about religion pertinent to the rest of the lesson and the unit in which the lesson is found? Is the lesson accurate? Is its presentation of details correct? And then on the next slide, we have some additional questions to ask ourselves. Does it teach children to look to religious texts or religious figures for moral instruction? Does it present religious stories as uncontested, straightforward historical accounts? Does it demonstrate sensitivity to religious diversity? Does the wording that the lesson recommends that teachers use promote religious claims, perhaps even inadvertently? And is it reasonable to expect a child at the intended age level to be able to distinguish between secular discussion of content on the one hand and faith claims on the other? And so in addition to these rubric questions, this is a benchmark for the assessment of the entire curriculum. Does this curriculum give disproportionate attention to the Bible, Christianity, and/or Judaism in comparison to other traditions? And so I want to turn now to just some of our summaries of concerns with this particular curriculum. And again, we are going to give some top-level takeaways and observations of the curriculum. In a few moments, Reagan is going to walk through how you can actually access the curriculum yourself if you haven't done so yet. And I'm going to be mentioning as I go through these examples some particular units and lessons and grade levels. You might want to jot some of these references down so that you can then go back later and actually read for yourself the lessons on some of these different areas. So our first top line concern is that this curriculum, again, for grades kindergarten through fifth grade, reading and language arts curriculum, essentially turns public school classrooms into Sunday schools. And that violates the religious freedom rights of children and their families. Children and their families have the right to go to public schools without worrying that the public schools will be teaching religion as opposed to teaching about religion. Some of the examples of when this happens. In kindergarten, Unit 8, Lesson 6, there's an entire lesson on King Solomon, and it teaches the Bible story as a straightforward fact without using objective language. In grade 1, Unit 1, Lesson 9, there's an entire lesson teaching the parable of the prodigal son, where the students go in depth into the Bible lesson and read the parable of the prodigal son. In grade 2, Unit 10, Fighting for a Cause, Lessons 2 and 3, the curriculum is entirely on Queen Esther, who is presented as a historical figure alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Cesar Chavez. In kindergarten, Unit 3, Lesson 7, there's an entire lesson on the Golden Rule, including explicit references to Jesus and the Sermon on the Mount. And I'm just going to read very briefly from the actual reader that kindergartners are read to, probably at that age of their reading. It says, one of the books of the Bible describes Jesus giving a talk atop a small mountain. During this talk, he wanted to share some very important lessons, so he climbed the mountain and spoke to a group of people who were gathered to hear him. The talks Jesus gave were called sermons. A sermon is a talk, like a lesson shared by a teacher, but the focus of the lesson is on a religious or moral subject. When Jesus talked about morals in his sermons, he was talking about the right and the wrong way to act. Because Jesus shared this sermon up on a mountain, this talk is called the Sermon on the Mount. Mount is short for mountain. So imagine having, this sounds like something that I would expect to have in a Sunday school. This is not a lesson that I would expect to have in a public school classroom, in this case for kids who are ages 5 and 6 in kindergarten. And so we have just this persistent and often gratuitous recitation and reading of scripture as part of several of these lessons for kids as young as 5 years old. The next summary is that Bible stories in many of these cases are not at all pertinent to the lesson or the learning objectives of this particular reading curriculum. Essentially, this is a reading and language arts curriculum that uses as part of its material many Bible stories. So an example of this is in grade 5, Unit 2, Lesson 3. There's a lesson on Renaissance art and culture. And so as part of these fifth graders learning about the Renaissance art and culture, they look at, among other things, the Last Supper painting by Leonardo da Vinci. And, it talks about how Leonardo da Vinci was the spirit of the Renaissance. And then in not just presenting the actual painting, it also goes into a lot of backstory about what is being presented in the painting itself. It includes reading from the Bible, from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 26. And it states that Leonardo chose this scene due to its, quote, importance to the Christian practice of communion. In the reader itself, again, that the fifth graders would be reading to learn about the Renaissance, this is what they would read. In the biblical narrative, Jesus gave his disciples hints that he would die. Jesus did not leave his disciples without hope, though. He also foreshadowed his resurrection when he was raised from the dead. At the dinner, Jesus goes on to describe how participation in this Last Supper would symbolize his sacrificial death and how his followers could honor his sacrifice in the future. So, an understanding of this story, I think one could argue, is not pertinent to understanding or appreciating the Last Supper as an example of Renaissance art, but the way it's presented is also presented as fact, as opposed to saying Christians believe that, to kind of offer again some objective distance to the teaching of the Bible in public schools. Another concern we have is that the curriculum creates in a number of places the impression that morality and Christian faith are mutually exclusive. An example of this is in kindergarten, Unit 3, Lesson 7. There is a lesson on Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And part of the application of that lesson, kindergarten teachers, are taught to teach their classes the saying, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." And then the lesson specifically references, again, the Sermon on the Mount from the Bible. And the issue is not teaching this as a life lesson. It's the picking and choosing of a particular religious text for this universal value, a universal value that is not specific or confined to any one religion or even religion itself. And so it sends a message to, again, these very young children that morality comes exclusively from the Bible. This lesson could be improved by changing the language to more modern language, such as treat others the way that you would want to be treated, as opposed to this rather antiquated language that the lesson teaches. And it could also refer to the Golden Rule without an explicit reference to the Bible or the Sermon on the Mount at all. Also in grade 5, Unit 9, there's a lesson called Juneteenth and Beyond on Abraham. And in that particular lesson, it reads, Abraham Lincoln and other leading abolitionists relied on a deep Christian faith and commitment to America's founding principles that people should be equal under the law to guide their certainty of the injustices of slavery. And so, again, I think one could make an argument that this is not entirely historically accurate. On one hand, it's also rather simplistic, but it also feels gratuitous to mention deep Christian faith here, as if that was the only driver for abolitionists or even for President Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. Another concern with the curriculum is that it tends to present Bible stories as straightforward historical accounts. It doesn't present them as what it is, as a collection of books of the Bible that people interpret in different ways. It is certainly not presented objectively as a work of literature or a holy book or some other way that one could present biblical texts. So an example of this is in grade 3, Unit 4, there's a section on learning about ancient Rome. And lesson 10 of that unit is on the life of Jesus. And they have a whole lesson teaching about the life of Jesus, again, referencing the biblical accounts and telling them as if they are literally true. I'll just read again from the Teacher's Guide. These New Testament texts of the Christian Bible describe what modern Christians believe to be the circumstances surrounding the birth of Jesus, celebrated today as Christmas. The angel told Mary that she had found favor with God. The angel explained that she would have a son who would be called Jesus, and that this was the predicted Messiah. And then when talking about Jesus's death, says, and I'm sorry, I'm not, so this is in, grade 3. It also says the Bible explains that Jesus rose from the dead. 3 days after his death by the Roman authorities, followers of Jesus visited his tomb and found it empty. An angel appeared and said he has risen and led them into the tomb. When the visitors entered the tomb, they found it empty. The Roman historian Josephus noted that Jesus had many disciples at the time of his death by Pilate. But those who had become his disciples did not abandon his discipleship. They reported that he had appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion and that he was alive. So again, it is not. It is the fact that these are being presented as historically true in public school classrooms, and that these are faith claims that are central to Christianity and that are important to be furthered by religious organizations and not the secular public schools. Another example is, again, back in that grade 5 lesson on Da Vinci's Last Supper. This was included in the reader. In the biblical narrative, Jesus gave his disciples hints that he would die. Jesus did not leave his disciples without hope, though. And this goes on to talk about how the Last Supper would symbolize his sacrificial death and how his followers could honor his sacrifice in the future. Faith claims that we would expect to find in a Sunday school and not in a public school classroom. Another concern with the curriculum is that among the religious texts offered, it overemphasizes Christianity and Christian texts and perspectives. If we remember the rubric that Dr. Chansey gave us, we have to say, is Christianity, again, that overall benchmark, is Christianity being and the Bible being emphasized over other religions? And that is undoubtedly the case throughout the curriculum. There are, as I noted with the stories of Esther and Solomon, there are certainly stories from the Hebrew Bible that are common to Christianity with the Old Testament. There are only a few references to the Muslim faith or to the Quran, and there are virtually no references at all to other religions, such as Hinduism or Buddhism, throughout the curriculum. We also find that when the Jewish texts are taught, they are taught just through the reference of the Christian perspective through the Old Testament, and we don't have other examples of Judaism that aren't in that shared text. And in some of the other places where the Muslim faith is discussed, there are actually no references to the Quran in some of those places. We also find, though, when ancient religions are discussed, they are often qualified with the term mythical, without that same modifier being used for other religions. And then finally, we are concerned that the use of the Bible and such the pervasive use of the Bible in this curriculum for elementary age kids is not age appropriate, as children are too young to distinguish in many cases between secular material and faith claims. And so often when we have examples of religion being taught in the schools, we see it in the secondary schools, and we see it as religious literacy as opposed to religious instruction. So there are places where having an understanding of some of the references that are drawn in art and literature help understand that art and literature with greater texture. But again, we see that with older kids and not with kids this young. So on the next slide, I just want to give a quick overview of some of the upcoming opportunities for advocacy. Reagan is going to be focused on talking about how you can engage at the very first level, which is actually presenting public comments and how some tools that we have to help you make public comments should you feel like you want to comment on some of your own concerns with this curriculum. That deadline is August 16th. This is leading up to a public hearing in Austin that starts on September 10th. It may go into other days that week, but September 10th is the day to consider. And we will be helping people who are interested in actually going to Austin and providing some public testimony to the State Board of Education. The State Board of Education will vote on whether to adopt or amend this curriculum in November. And so it's important to remember that even if you don't engage with public comments, or maybe in addition to engaging with public comments, you also have an opportunity to raise your concerns directly to your State Board of Education member. And if you're not sure who your State Board of Education member is, we can We're going to put in the chat. Thank you, Sarah. We're going to put in the chat. You can link there to see who represents you. You can just enter your home address, your voting address there, and it will tell you who your State Board of Education person is. And you can email that person directly your letter expressing your concerns with the curriculum. And then after the vote in November, if this curriculum goes forward, it is not immediately put into place. At that point, each school district in the state will vote on whether to adopt this curriculum. And so at that point, should the curriculum pass the State Board of Education, there will be additional opportunities to raise any concerns that you may have directly with your school district. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Reagan to talk about how you can actually access the curriculum and then how you can submit comments. And we will have, just a reminder, question and answer at the end. So we will go through some of these questions you're putting in the chat before the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, so we are going to first take a look at reviewing the curriculum. Go ahead and share my screen. All right, so going forward, and I've tried to put a lot of graphics on here and make it as easy and as accessible as possible when you're looking at your phone or if you're looking at your desktop going forward. So let's just dive right in. And keep in mind, the comments are due August 16th. So you have 10 days from now to get them in, take your time, and review the curriculum. So before we begin, Amanda already discussed all of this and what exactly we're looking for, our summary of concerns. And these slides will be made available to you all. I believe we are going to put them in an email after the webinar, and they will also be put in the chat. That way you can also look at these slides. You can check out the rubric. You can click on the links. Whatever you see on here will be made available to you. All right. So skipping ahead a little bit, instructions for reviewing the curriculum. So step one, first and foremost, you are going to navigate to the TEA's website, which will look just like this, whether you're using your phone or your computer. And you are going to create an account to view the lessons in their entirety. If navigating to that website is a little difficult, please feel free to just click this link right here. Again, we have tons of links on here. That way it's easy for you all to navigate and to go from there. So as soon as you click right there, you are going to be taken to this instruction materials review and approval page. And after signing in, you are going to click on that link, which will take you there. After you click on that link, you are going to, again, you're on this page. You're going to scroll down until you see the Access Materials under Review page. So again, we've just logged in, you've signed in, you've made an account. So just to go back, you've made an account, you click on this page, and then you scroll down. So just like in this video, until you see right here, Access Materials under Review. You are going to click English Language Arts and Reading, ELAR K-5 materials, which is this first box right here. And as soon as you click it, it's going to give you a notice to reviewers. You're going to scroll all the way down and you're going to click the blue I agree button. All right. And then once you click the I agree button, it's going to take you to a new page that looks just like this, where it says OER Kindergarten, RLA, and you are going to have the option to choose from all of these different curriculums or these different grades. And again, if it's easier to just use the template that we've given you, you can click on one of these and it will take you right to it. Okay. So then looking forward, after you've chosen whichever grade, so say you want to choose kindergarten, as I've chosen right here, going to scroll down and you are going to click that grade. So I've clicked kindergarten. You're going to click the green start button right at the top, which will then take you to a web page titled Program Level Resources right up there. But that's not the page we're looking for. So I'm going to go back right here. The last step, tap the blue button that says next up in the top right corner to navigate through additional pages until you come to a page titled K space blank RLA units, listing unit numbers, titles, and components. So to visualize that, you've been taken to the program level resource page. You're going to click the next in the top right corner. That's still not the page, so keep clicking next, keep clicking. And then there it is, the K5 RLA units, which is going to differ depending on what you're on. And that's a page you should be looking for. So once you've navigated to that page, here we're going to go back. I'm going to show you at the bottom here. Notice how it has the option for teacher guide under all of these units. Those are what you're going to be looking out for, all right? Each unit that you see, farms, plants, fairy tales, the senses, they're each going to have teacher guides. So this teacher guide, once you're on there, that's what you are going to be looking for. It contains the lessons, the bulk of it, everything you're looking for is in there. And you can examine the other components, such as the activity book. Those can also be helpful, but they're not necessary for you to do so. And once within one of these teacher guides, you're going to use the table of contents to see the topics of the different lessons, and you're going to read the chosen lessons and any additional ones that interest you. So just a quick note, these teacher guides are quite lengthy, obviously. They're teacher guides. I recently clicked on the 5 census one, and it was 125 pages, which is a lot to go through. So instead of going through all 125 pages, it's also very helpful, and it can be a little easier to do a quick word search of terms that we're looking for, such as right here, religion, religious, pray, worship, God, Jesus, Christ, Bible, biblical, Testament, church, Judaism, Jew, Islam, Muslim, etc. And such searches show that religion sometimes figures more prominently in lesson than lesson titles might suggest. So if you're like me and you aren't super great with your technology, you might be wondering, how do I do a word search on my Mac computer or your PC computer? I have it right here for you to navigate back to. If you're on a PC, just Control and the F button, you click them at the same time, and then a little search bar should pull up in the top right corner, and you just type in whatever word you're looking for. And if you're on your Mac computer, just press the Command F keys at the same time. You can also look this up on Google, or again, just navigate back to this image, and those are the keys you want to be pressing. So after that, once you have accessed the teacher guide, once you've gone through, you've looked for those keywords that we just discussed, you're going to review your chosen lessons and or units with the criteria in mind that Amanda discussed at the beginning of this, as well as other considerations that you deem important. And if problematic or questionable content arises, please make notes describing the problem, along with the corresponding grade, unit, lesson, and page number to reference in your public comments. So I highly recommend returning back to these slides because those are important for you to make certain that you write down and take note of, again, the grade, the unit, the lesson, and the page number, because those are going to come back into play later. All right, and then you're all done reviewing the curriculum. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me, call me at any time, and I'll be happy to answer them. But now that we've actually reviewed the curriculum, how do you submit your comments? And that is what I'm going to show next. All right, for submitting your comments, again, due August 16th, just want to reiterate that due date one more time. You are going to send the feedback back to TEA. So there are 3 different kinds of feedback that you can submit. You can, number 1, submit a factual error. 2, a general comment on matters other than errors. Or 3, you can flag a potential suitability concern. And all 3 ways of submitting feedback begin on this webpage. So if I were to click on this link right now, it would take me to this one right here. And this is what it would look like on your smartphone. Again, it would look very similar on your laptop as well. But I'm just going to show what this looks like. So this is the original page that you're going to be taken to. And it's going to have ask for all of this information. But we're going to go through it together. So looking first at step 1, submitting a factual error. You're going to scroll down, and you are going to select the I want to report an error in a program, which I click right there. And the second you click it, I'm going to replay that because it goes very quickly. The second you click, I want to report an error, it'll transition you to a totally new page for reporting an error, which is right at the top. And once you do that, you're going to scroll down, enter some personal information. And then as you keep scrolling, you're going to hit this question that says, submitting on behalf of self or entity name, and you are going to choose self, which has been chosen right there. And then for course and grade, you are going to choose ELAR and the appropriate grade level that you have been reviewing. For publisher, you're going to go ahead and choose Open Education Resources, which is right there. For the program question, you will identify your grade level. So I was given the option OER K through 5 Reading Language Arts. And for component, indicate the unit that has the lesson for which you want to provide a comment. So say I was looking at G1 Knowledge Unit 2 activity book, that is what I would be providing commentary on. Although again, we're typically looking at the teacher guides, everything else is just a helpful resource. And you then are going to provide the specific information as requested on the form. So again, we see it asks for the page number, the URL, and it asks all sorts of other information like what was the factual error, what was the explanation, reference or source for correction. And that's why it's so important when you're reviewing the curriculum to make sure you're taking good notes again on the grade, the unit, the page number, and what exactly caught your eye. So then we are going to take a look at submitting a general comment. So again, we're just on that original homepage that was on the first slide of this presentation. You're going to click on that, and then you're going to scroll down. Rather than choosing that you want to report an error, you're just going to say on I want to comment on a program option. And it's just the same exact process as last time, where it's going to ask for some personal information. And then it's going to ask again, submit, who are you submitting on behalf of? You're going to put yourself. And then for course and grade, choose ELAR. For publisher, we're going to choose Open Education Resources. The program question will identify your grade level. The component will indicate the unit that has a lesson for which you want to provide comment. And then you're going to continue providing specific information as requested on the form. For flagging a potential suitability concern, it's a little different. So if you think the lesson includes material that is unsuitable for use in public schools, go to the sentence reading. If you wish to flag a potential suitability concern, please use the suitability reporting form and click the link. Alternatively, you may be able to access a suitability reporting form directly using this link, which again is why I recommend just checking out these slides because all the links that you can need are just right here for you, and they should be bolded or in blue or highlighted. And then you're going to continue to the next page for further details on flagging potential suitability concern. That's what that page would look like. So once you've gotten to the flag and potential suitability concern page, again, just like the last three ones, you're going to say you are submitting on behalf of self. For subject grade band, choose English Language Arts, ELAR, as we've been saying, K through 5, which is right there. And then for suitability indicator, this is new. So for suitability indicator, choose the category that best describes why a lesson is inappropriate. Selecting a particular indicator will bring up Texas's criteria for that category. So let's see that. And then, for example, choosing the parental rights and responsibilities indicator will bring up the explanation. The instructional material should recognize and not contradict that parents have the right to direct the moral and religious training of their children and the duty to support their children's education. And then, like you've been doing on the other two forms, you're going to provide details and remaining questions. And then you would just click submit. And that's it. You're all done. So again, I know that was a lot of information. I know it's a lot of technical stuff and a lot of little nitpicky details. Just make sure you go through the slides. They have all the information you might need, all the links. Those videos, you can just play them on each slide. Just to pause them, you click them once. But that will walk you through the whole process on how to review the curriculum and submit your feedback. And I believe that is all for me.
So with that said, we'll be opening the floor up for Q&A. We've had some questions and hopefully answered some as we've gone along. But one question that we wanted to throw out there is specifically about public comments and emails. Amanda, maybe you could speak to this piece a little bit, but would love to hear, do you have any sense of effective elements in writing public comments or these sorts of emails? Will there be any templates that we can send out? What are your thoughts in that regard?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that it's authentic to you and your experience. So and we will provide kind of a basic template, so to just kind of get you started, but it's important for you to for you to give in your comment how you're related to the community, why you care. Are you a public school parent or family member? Are you a public school product? Are you a member of a faith community? Kind of give some basis there, and then be as specific as we noted here. Be as specific as you can about where your particular concerns in the curriculum are. We've given you some of the overarching ideas. We've given some examples. Again, not a complete list of all of the objectionable content in the curriculum, but some top line examples here. But I think it's just very important that that you feel like any kind of comment, even if you're just objecting to one of the lessons in here, is noted in the public comment. As Reagan went through, there's a lot more of a structure around the public comments that are due on August 16th versus the comments that you can submit to your State Board of Education member. I think that while it wouldn't hurt for you to send messages to the other State Board of Education members, these are representative places on the state board. And so your sway as a voter is going to have the most pull in the actual district in which you reside. And so when you're writing to your member on the State Board of Education, just identify yourself as I live in your district, District 13 or whatever it might be, and I have concerns about this curriculum. And you don't need to be quite as, I guess there's just not the same kind of formal process as Reagan went through for the public comments. Again, those can be submitted at any time before the November vote. If you can get it in before the September 10th public hearing, I think that would be great, but you do have more time to get your views in through the actually just emailing your State Board of Education member. Hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Amanda. And would you mind reminding us why it's important that our comments are unique and not necessarily a copy and paste comment?
Yeah, so I think that, again, we'll be providing a template just to kind of get you started if you have some writer's block. But it's really important because of public comment, the procedure there, that they actually have to read and address every unique public comment that's submitted, as opposed to if there was just one form that was submitted, that is dealt with much more easily. And so having all of these unique comments also is able to show kind of your unique voice and your perspective on this issue, as opposed to just having a formulaic response.
Thanks, Amanda. One other question that was thrown in the chat earlier, what will we be asking the SBOE to do? Are we asking them to adopt a different curriculum? Are we asking them to adopt this one but remove specific religious material? Are we asking them to make correct references to make clear that they're not historical? What is the ask?
So I'm happy to take that one, or invite any of our friends at Texas Impact if they have other perspectives on this. But the ask here, so the TEA was under there was actually a law passed by the Texas legislature that required them to develop a curriculum. And so this is the curriculum that TEA adopted. So I think that the most effective ask is to ask them to amend the curriculum to take out, either take out these references altogether or to offer language that would fix it. So for example, in the example I gave from the kindergarten lesson with Goldilocks, I made a suggestion there about how the language could be changed to universalize teaching the golden rule. It's not that teaching the golden rule is not a good thing, but the way it's presented, it is teaching as if the golden rule originated with and is unique to Christianity, and to the Sermon on the Mount in particular, in a way that it is not, that is a universal rule that is shared by many different religions and by people who don't have a religious tradition. So if we can offer actually an alternative way to teach the material in a way that doesn't promote the Bible or Christianity, doesn't promote religion or denigrate other religions or non-religion, I think that's going to be the most effective way to get our point across. Now, once the advocacy moves to the school boards, should this be adopted with some of the material that we feel still find concerning, then the advocacy will change because the school boards are actually picking and choosing between different kinds of, between different curriculum that they could be adopting. But we'll save that advocacy for another day. Hi, Bea.
Hey, how are you? I just wanted to add that in addition to writing to your school board members, it's helpful to know that the reason they're doing this is, as Amanda said, because they were required by law. So telling your legislators this has turned out to be a problem is going to be helpful, not necessarily in the case in the immediate term, but I think that the general expectation would be if they don't adopt this curriculum, they've already taken 2 other swings at it. So the TEA has been working on this assignment for a while, and the people that they've heard from most have been religious conservatives who said that it wasn't religious enough. So there's already clearly tension. I think if they don't adopt this curriculum, the most beneficial outcome would be a legislative change. So I just want to encourage people, don't keep your advocacy siloed to the State Board of Education. Make sure legislators know that you're participating in this advocacy effort so that they can understand that their legislative work has caused problems now for an agency that is honestly overworked all the time, regardless of how you feel about all the work they do. They're very understaffed. So it's important that legislators ultimately own responsibility for the problem that they've created.
Thank you so much, Bea. Some of the other questions that are rolling in, is there any connection with the adoption of this curriculum and any sorts of funding? And then do we know the backstory on this curriculum? Who was consulted? Who created this curriculum? Where it came from? Could you speak to that piece as well?
I cannot speak to where it came from in the origins of all of this, although certainly happy to look into that and try to answer that question. Yes, there is a financial incentive for school districts to adopt this curriculum over other curricula. I believe one of the people in the chat said it's $60 per student. And so when we think about how underfunded public schools are already, that is a significant financial incentive once it gets to the school district stage for them to adopt this curriculum over other choices that they do have. But again, there is still an opportunity to make this curriculum, to fix many of the problems in this curriculum before it even gets to that stage, and to determine then what the advocacy ask would be for school districts at that point. And then I'll just say, I did see, as far as the origin of this particular bill, I believe the legislation was HB HB 1605, which was passed in the 88th legislative session and took effect September 1st of last year.
Another question that has been popping up is whether we can provide some of the examples that you mentioned in the curriculum specifically so people can make public comments. Is that something that you would be willing to provide, Amanda, for folks as they make public comments?
Yes, absolutely. Happy to give some of the examples. I'll also say that we've been working with Texas Freedom Network, which I know many of the people on this call have also been, and they are working on a report that will be released closer to the 16th. So not sure how, but that also has more examples in it. But happy to give the examples that I provided today, just to give the reference to the actual lessons and unit numbers, and you can read for yourself if you'd like to see how, again, using that rubric of questions that we had to see whether it falls over the line from being just an objective teaching of religion into an actual devotional or putting a thumb on the scale for Christianity or religion in general.
So with that said, I think we've tried to answer as many questions as we can. If there's any last minute questions, feel free to put it in. But just to wrap up, I would love to hear maybe Bea and Amanda, both of you can share a little bit about the precedent that this kind of curriculum, if adopted as is, could set not just in our state, but beyond.
Yes, absolutely. I'll just say, this is part of a much larger movement that we're seeing in other places to really infuse the teaching and in some places the pushing of Christianity in the public schools. Our neighbor to the north in Oklahoma, we've seen this state school superintendent there really aggressively push Bible teaching. They're actually in secondary schools, again, older students. This is elementary, but also the posting of the 10 Commandments in public school classrooms. And because of the size and the influence of the state, if this curriculum goes through, we can expect to see this model, I think, replicated in other states as well. I saw you nodding, Bea. Do you agree with that?
Actually, I would just, and I know we've got a couple of other folks on this call who are more expert on it than I am. But Texas, because of its size, drives so much of the national textbook market that it's a real concern that whatever gets adopted here would be adopted pro forma in other states. And we have heard from colleagues in other states that they're getting hit with this exact same thing. So I mean, I don't know if I would say it's part of Project 25 per se, 2025, but it's definitely part of an overarching agenda, just as Amanda said. And I'd also like to just echo comments that are in the chat that I've been seeing. This is a great opportunity for lots of groups and our members who are engaged in lots of different religious freedom activities to come together and do something collaborative. So maybe that's Pollyanna, like no great loss without some small gain. But I do want to point out that this is we're honored to be in partnership with the BJC and the other groups that are involved, ADL, and just want to thank you all for being part of a collaboration that recognizes that faith doesn't mean, it's like the Princess Bride. Think you don't know what that word means. Sometimes we would say to legislators and other leaders. So thanks on behalf of Texas Impact for having us.
We have just a couple of final announcements before we go. First, we are so grateful for your engagement here. We're going to be sending the recording so you can watch again on the how-tos. We're going to be sending the slide decks. But we'd love to poll you now to ask you, after doing this, does this feel like something that you could do? Are you willing to make a public comment? And so we're asking just to do a quick poll. It should be popping up on your screen. And you'll see in here that next week on Monday, we'll put the information in the chat. And we will be hosting office hours. And so if you are interested in doing public comment, if you get into it, if you have questions, members of BJC and Texas Impact will be present for a 2-hour period, so that you can just hop on and ask your questions, and we can help workshop some things with you if you have any questions. And then we don't have a date and time yet, but the last week of August, we are going to be hosting, with some of the partners that were mentioned in the chat, another meeting webinar for us to talk about the next stage of advocacy, which is actually going to Austin to provide public testimony. And so thank you. We've had over 100 people active on this call, on this webinar today. We had even more people who are interested in being involved and are going to get the recording. So we're so grateful to have such a large sampling of people who are willing to do this bigger advocacy ask, and would encourage you to share this information with others that you think would be wanting to take action here. All right. Any last call for any other information from our co-hosts and panelists? Any other information we need to cover? Well, thank you all. Look for your email inboxes for all of the information we talked about. Thank you all.